Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and before we get started on tonight's video, I want to let you know about 2 books, actually 3 books, from tonight's author, Cryptic Nightmares. If you guys have liked the Tiny Town series, then the Tiny Town series, both Season 1 and Season 2, Book 1 and Book 2 of the Effluvium Haze novels, My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown, is currently available on Amazon, as well as Season 3, which is not just Season 3, but a whole next book is The Study, an Effluvium Haze novel, is also available on Amazon in Kindle, paperback, and hardcover. And now, on to tonight's story. We all woke up rather late. Sleeping in those few extra hours was much appreciated, and all thanks to how safe we felt sleeping in basically a vault. We had been through the ringer the past few days, and I knew that all of us really enjoyed the rest, mostly because it gave us that little bit of time to take a breath and let our muscles and wounds heal a little. Bodhi, prancing back and forth near the door, had me slightly alarmed, and I hesitated as I unlocked and opened it. Everyone else was armed and ready behind me just in case the fog and the creatures within had caught up to us overnight. My breathing suddenly returned, and I didn't even realize that I'd been holding my breath as the door opened. There was no fog, no little lizard creatures, nothing to announce the coming of the beasts, and Bodhi sprinted out the door and out of the building. I chased after him, worried that something was wrong. However, as I made it outside, he had already found a patch of grass and was relieving himself before sniffing around for a few seconds and casually trotting back to me. "Is everything okay out there?" Grace yelled from inside the building. "Yeah, all good, we're clear," I yelled back, and watched as everyone else stepped out into the sunlight of day, led by Addie. Without words, we all just stood there in the parking lot, each looking off into the trees and over the hills that surrounded us. The headquarters itself was at the top of a rather significantly sized hill, and gave us a good vantage point to be able to see into the distance. The landscape was wildly different here than we were used to. The view of all the hills and rock formations and trees would have been serene and utterly beautiful, especially compared to the flat, endless cornfields of central Illinois that we were used to. But sadly, the beauty of our surroundings was robbed by the constant worry of what could have been waiting over the next hill or just beyond the tree line. I hadn't even noticed that Grace had returned inside until she came running back out, yelling in an excited tone, "Hey guys, check it out! I was snooping around in there and found these notes!" We hurried together in a little group so that we could all see what she was talking about. She had found pages upon pages of little notes taken about various calls that had been coming into the station. There were notes jotted down vaguely describing each creature, things like hundreds of little 6-legged lizards, spiders the size of a coon, large dog with horns and weird feet, bear-sized panther with 6 legs, giant building-sized bull with ram horns. Each description was slightly different, but written over and over across numerous pages. "Holy shit. They must have gotten so many people calling in when this all started," Brandy said after reading through a few of the pages. "Yeah, and check this out. I think one of them was working on some form of theory about each one," Grace said as she rifled through the pages to find a specific one. When she held up the page for us all to take a look at it, it was just a piece of notebook paper that had been torn out. It had a few holes in it at the top, which looked like it had been pinned to a bulletin board and taken down a few times. Someone had drawn some sort of flow chart on it with little notes next to each of the creatures, or what they had called them at least. Listed were the little geckos with a note that said just the word Scout next to it. There was a heading that said Main Kill Group, with descriptions of the crawlers and lurkers under it, and a note that said Always Seen Together, works as a team. Next to the description of the bear-sized creature it deemed a stalker was the note Loner, Ambush Predator, uses lures to draw prey in close. The description of what I called a behemoth they labeled as simply giant. The notes they had for it didn't really give us much information, since all it said was highly aggressive, tramples buildings. What sparked my interest the most was that at the top of the page, with lines drawn to all the other creatures' descriptions, sat a big bubble with a question mark in it. Next to the bubble, each having their own question marks after, were only 2 words. And those 2 words stirred up so much worry in my mind, yet it merely said leader and queen. It seemed like we weren't the only ones that had an ant colony hive mind theory. about these creatures. Shit. What the fuck do you think that means? Brandy said, pointing to the question mark at the top of the page. Actually, I don't think it really means much of anything based on the lack of description. I would assume that if they had seen what that was, we would have some sort, even if it was vague, of a description. So my guess is that based on the behavior of those other ones, they're guessing that there's something in control of all of them. Either way, we don't really have enough evidence here to know what that's supposed to mean, I responded. Grant, will you come play with me and Bodhi? Addie interrupted and began tugging on Grant's arm. Yes, of course, Addie. What are we playing? Grant said with a smile as he let Addie pull him by the arm over to another part of the parking lot. I watched as Addie picked up a stick and gave her best attempt at throwing it for Bodhi to chase it. The stick flew only a few feet away, and Bodhi did little more than give her a confused look as she ran to get it herself. She handed the stick to Grant as if it was his turn to throw it, and Bodhi ran after it since there was much more distance in his toss. Izzy stood next to Grace, just holding herself up by holding Grace's leg and watching the adults as we talked. The insanity of what we were all going through seemed to have no effect on either of my daughter's spirits. We were just as happy and playful as they had been before this all had started, and I truly admired that. I wanted so badly to just stay here and let them play and just be kids. But I knew that if we did, we would end up needing to rush out of here, being chased by creatures that wanted nothing more than to kill us and eat us. I hate to say this, guys, but we probably better load up and get moving. I'd much rather continue on calmly now than have to do it screaming for our lives later. I finally spoke up. Just as I said that, Addie came running back to us with Grant and Bodhi following closely behind her. Watch me run, Daddy, I'm really fast, Addie said, before running in a circle around the trucks as fast as her little legs would carry her. Wow, you are super fast. Good job. Now let's hop up in your car seat. We gotta get moving, monkey butt. I called out to her after her second lap. Addie yelled, okay, at me before running another lap as I opened her door so she could climb up. Bodhi waited until almost everyone else was in the two vehicles before jumping up into the back of the SUV and settling next to the girl's feet. We tested the radios, and although they worked flawlessly, we noticed that both vehicles were going to be in need of gas soon, and the gas cans we had were in the Jeep that was stolen. Damn it. We're gonna have to pull into the next town we find and fill the tanks, I reluctantly said into the radio as we began to pull out of the parking lot. Just a simple one-word response was all I got in return, and I could feel in Grant's voice how much they didn't want to do that. I was so sick of having to put myself in danger to keep us going, but I knew deep down that it was what I had to do. So I held my tongue and pushed through the fears and pain. We needed rest, all of us. Time for wounds to heal and muscles to stop aching. Time for our minds to unwind and the stress levels to fall back down into a comfortable range again. However, this new world wasn't going to allow it. I knew it was still going to be a very long time before we got any form of true rest from all this insanity. The low rumble of the tires over the pavement helped a little at drowning out my thoughts and burying my frustrations, but mostly I had become so accustomed to the sound that I almost didn't hear it. As we left the parking lot of the state trooper's headquarters, I had looked up at the sky and noticed the menacing clouds threatening to produce rain, which we had not seen in nearly 2 months. After about 3 miles down the road, the sky finally burst, releasing torrents of rain down onto us. All I could think was, great. This is just what we needed. Fog, insane, bloodthirsty bears, and now rain so heavy we can barely see through it. Grace looked over at me to see my knuckles white on the steering wheel as the rain quickly turned from a light sprinkle to a torrential downpour. She reached over and placed a hand on my arm, which caused me to instantly loosen my grip and take a breath to calm my nerves. The girls quietly watched the rain out the windows, and beside the roar of the water hitting the SUV, it was silent inside the vehicle. After a few moments of Grace resting her hand on me, she finally whispered to me, "Hey, I know this is all crazy, but you're doing a good job. We may be a little battered and bruised, but the girls are safe and happy. And we're all still alive." I turned my head to meet her eyes and smiled at her before redirecting my focus back on trying to see through the rain, of which the wipers were severely struggling to keep up with. The sky continued to pour buckets of water on our vehicles for nearly 20 minutes before finally calming to a steady, more manageable rain. Brandy's voice called out over the radio just in time as the low fuel light flashed to life from the dashboard. "Town's coming up. Grant said he saw one from the top of that last hill." Grace picked up the microphone from the radio and checked the dash, looking over my arm before she responded. "Good timing. Our fuel light just came on. We'll have to stop. No other choice." I took the microphone from Grace and added my own thoughts. "Let's not make this a big thing. Straight to the gas station, fill up, get out. We can grab what we can in the gas station itself, but I'd rather not do any extra exploring. Exploring town seems to be what we run into the most trouble. I'm getting sick of being bitten by those old bastards." "I think that's a unanimous agreement on that plan. Grant and I want to keep moving as much as fucking possible," Brandy's voice said over the radio. A few minutes passed as we all drove in silence. With the rain, it was difficult to pick out, but I noticed that as we got closer to the town, there was a hint of the purple fog floating amongst the raindrops. I glanced back to see Addie with her head resting on her chest, softly snoring. Bodhi slept on the floor between the back seats, and Izzy quietly babbled to herself, playing with her feet in her car seat. I met eyes with Grace, as I turned back towards the road, and she gave me a smile. "Looks like this town has 3 options for gas stations. We're gonna need to hit the closest one and get the hell out of here. Don't know if you noticed the fog or not, but we may have some creatures to deal with there." Grant's voice came over the radio. Before I could respond myself, Grace grabbed the mic and let them know that we had also noticed it. We passed the edge of town, and both vehicles slowed to a crawl as we drove down the roads to the closest station. It was all just guessing, since there was no signs, and none of us had any idea where we really were. Moving slowly kept our vehicles quiet, and luckily we made it to the closest gas station without any incidents. However, as it came into view, my eyes widened in both confusion and disappointment. "Holy shit, do you see that?" "Yeah, I see it." A yellow Jeep laying on its side, mangled and destroyed from having run clear through one of the pillars of the gas pump's overhang. The remaining pillar was bent and holding up one edge of the overhang, while the other was destroyed and lying on the ground. Of the 6 back-to-back pumps, only 2 were left intact from the collision. "Is that?" "Yeah, it is." I cut Grace off before she could even finish the question. It was the Jeep that Sam had stolen with half of our stuff in it. We pulled up to the 2 unharmed pumps, barely covered from the rain by the destroyed overhang, just hoping that they would still work. I knew I really didn't want to go further into town to find a different gas station, and I assumed that nobody else did either. As soon as both vehicles were parked next to the pumps, Grant jumped out of the cruiser and, with bow drawn, ran into the building to activate the pumps. The building itself seemed rather unharmed, and still had overhead lights lit inside. Knowing that we got a rare opportunity to recover at least some of our stolen items, I grabbed one of the pistols and walked cautiously over to the downed Jeep. The cold rain pricked my face as I tried to find a way into the destroyed car. I could see the gas cans inside and overturned. I got around to the far side of the vehicle and finally found that my best bet was going to be going in from above, in one of the cracked and destroyed windows. Just as I was about to start climbing, I was suddenly interrupted when Grant's voice called from the doorway to the gas station. "Hey guys! Pumps are on, but you may want to come check this out," is all he said before returning back into the depths of the building. Grace and Brandy both got gas flowing into the thirsty tanks of the cars before running inside, and I was close behind them. The smell of death once again hit me as I walked through the doorway. We followed Grant over to an area near the restrooms to find 2 bodies covered in bites and scrapes, and clearly had been dead for at least a day. The bodies had been drained and sucked dry by a lurker, possibly a couple of them judging from the amount of puncture wounds, but even with all the damage done, it was still possible to tell who they were. "Ha! Serves those sons of bitches right," Brandy blurted out before anyone else could speak. As bad as it was, and as evil as it makes me feel, I have to admit, I did feel a sense of justice at the sight of the 2 bodies. The people that did nothing but put us in danger and get us into trouble, then ultimately stealing from us and trying to screw us over with absolutely no remorse? I agreed with Brandy. It was horrible, but yes, it did serve them right. Hey, not to rush anyone, but let's grab what we can from here and get back whatever we can from the Jeep. And get out of here. Grant's voice called out from the chip aisle over the rustling of plastic bags as he grabbed what he could carry. The three of us, still looking at the bodies of Sam and Destiny, met eyes without a word. Each took off in a different direction and grabbed as many supplies as we could. I was soon behind her, and after unloading the various candy bars and beef jerky I had in my arms, I returned to the Jeep and climbed in from the top, grabbing the gas cans. There were 3 of them. Jerry cans, I think they're typically called. The tall, skinny red metal cans usually mounted to the back of trail jeeps or military vehicles. One of the 3 was about half full, while the other 2 were empty. After setting the 3 cans next to Grace by the pump so she could fill them, I gave her a kiss and went back inside. The rain still fell outside, and sadly it was beginning to pick back up again. Luckily, there was still enough of the overhang to cover Grace while she filled the extra gas cans. When I got back inside, I was hit with that same stench of rot coming from the bodies. Grant and Brandy had already made a trip out to the cruiser to unload, and were back inside again for another load. As I was dumping every container of beef jerky into some plastic bags I found from behind the counter, I heard it. Some soft and quiet skittering. At first I thought that the stress was causing me to form a paranoid auditory hallucination. Suddenly my first assumption was proved wrong as I realized that I had a pistol and Grant had a bow, but neither of the girls had grabbed their weapons from the vehicle. Plus Grace was outside. "Holy shit!" is all I heard before the screech of one of the creatures crawling in from a back room. I heard Grace yelling for us to get out of there from outside. Grant reacted faster than I did, dropping what he had in his hands and grabbing his bow. The crawler jumped for Brandy as she ran towards the front door unarmed and with her hands full of bags of food. I just barely caught the creature by one of its legs and swung it around, throwing it back towards the back of the building. Grant hit it mid-air with an arrow, causing its body to begin tumbling through the air. "Good fucking shot, man!" I yelled just as we began to feel the thunderous footsteps of a behemoth. My eyes widened and we both began to scramble as 2 more of the crawlers ran into the building. I scooped up as many of the bags I dropped as I could with one hand and fired 2 shots at the closest crawler. One shot hit and took it out, but the second shot missed wildly. Grant grabbed as much as he could from what he dropped and just ran for the door. With his arms full, he couldn't fire his bow, and trying to sprint, my aim was extremely compromised. The roof at the back of the building exploded as we got to the front door. Huge concrete chunks fell to the floor as the behemoth pushed his massive head into the building. The remaining crawlers got crushed by a big chunk of ceiling. Grace and Brandy already had the vehicles running and ready to go for us to just jump in and they could speed off. The behemoth trampled his way through the rest of the building just as Grant and I jumped into the vehicles. An immense roar bellowed out of the giant beast, shaking the very air around us that you could see in the rain as it fell, and tires squealed as we sped away. The massive creature began to give chase for just enough to make me consider hanging out the window with one of the assault rifles, but stopped just before I started putting the plan into action. Another roar echoed through the sky as we sped away down the road. As my heart began to calm down, all I could think is that I was so happy that nobody sustained any injuries during the encounter. The soft rain pattered against the windshields and the girls giggled back and forth in the back seat, not realizing all the danger we'd just been in. It was times like that when I most enjoyed their young ignorance as bliss outlook on life and everything that was going on. It definitely helped Grace and I control our emotions and our fears, and there wasn't screaming and crying from them. It was hard to be overly worried when I saw my daughters smiling and giggling at each other as Addie babbled at her little sister to make her laugh. We did our best to keep the SUV only on roads that kept the digital compass saying south. Still, without any map or form of GPS, it ended up being a lot of country and back roads, which I was okay with because it made me feel like we would have a lower chance of running into more creatures the further we were from cities and more dense population areas. On the other hand, it gave us fewer opportunities to stop for more supplies, and even though nobody said anything, I knew that we were all starting to get sick of eating nothing but chips and beef jerky as meals on the road. I knew that we really needed to find another house to hole up in for a night or two to recuperate and get a few decent cooked meals in us before we continued. As Grace drove, I grabbed the radio to make an announcement. Hey guys, we really need to find another house or somewhere safe we can hold up for a couple of days in a row. I don't know about you all, but I think we could all use a little rest. The radio crackled for a few minutes before I got a response from the other vehicle. I knew that they would agree, but I also knew that with everything going on, there wouldn't be anywhere that we came across that was truly safe. The best we could hope for would be somewhere off the beaten path enough to give us a couple of days before they found us. The thought suddenly crossed my mind of how they seemed to keep finding us. Was it some sort of extra sense they had that honed in on us, or was it just blind luck? They kept sending out the little scouts in all directions until they found us again. I also wondered why the behemoths kept giving up chase so quickly. The first one chased us clear out of town, then came back for more a couple of days later. I was curious what had changed. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea to us. Do you want to find one later today, or just off this road, or pick a side road and hope there's a house down it? Grant responded to the radio speaker. I was still caught up in my thoughts and curiosities about how we had been able to go about our business uninterrupted for nearly a month before we had to start running again with a new plan. I also noticed that the new stalker creatures seemed to be more common the further we got. I began to see a lot fewer lurkers. We got a little more information about all of them at the police headquarters, but in truth, it wasn't much that we hadn't already figured out ourselves. The main question on my mind was why? And how? Why was all this happening? What caused it? And how did these creatures get here? Where do they come from? So basically all the questions, all of them. Grace suddenly nudged me and I realized that I had been so caught up in my train of thought that I hadn't answered the question. Oh yeah, sorry, I said to her before pressing the button on the mic. Well, convenience-wise, a house along this road would be nice, but I think safety-wise, we'd be better off the further we got from a common road like this. Again, the radio crackled for a little bit before the answer came. Okay, well, we're gonna wait till a little later in the day before we pick a road and just hope for the best, Grant responded. Grace looked at me and spoke before I responded to Grant. It's a good plan. I could really go for some form of a shower and some real food. Just really hope we can find something that'll last us a while. Yeah, me too, I said to her before responding to Grant from the radio. Okay, man. Sounds good to me. I then crawled into the back while Grace drove and did my best to play with the girls while they were still in their car seats. Music on the radio had long since cut off, and even though I wasn't a fan of the genre, I kind of wished I had grabbed the country CDs from the truck at the rest stop. If only for something to listen to besides the steady drone of tires on pavement. Daddy, I want to watch a movie, Addie finally said when she was done with her little sitting dance party to no music. I know, sweetie. But there's no TV in here, so we can't. I'm sorry. But I want to watch Moana. I'm sorry. Maybe we can watch it when we stop at a house with a TV. Okay. And not go night-night? No. We don't have to go night-night right now. But we will later when it gets dark. And after we watch a movie, okay? Okay. She smiled really big at me, and I climbed back up into the passenger seat just before Grace followed the cruiser off onto the side road that had been silently selected by Grant and Brandy in the car ahead of us. I understood why they didn't say anything about picking a road, because at this point, nobody's guess would have been any better than anyone else's. The road itself, I thought, was a pretty good choice. It was gravel and looked a little less traveled, meaning if it did lead to a house, it would for sure give us somewhere secluded, hopefully safe, even if it were for a day or two. The sun had already begun to set, and the colors of the sky were truly amazing. Even though I still had the worry of getting overrun in the back of my mind, I looked over at Grace as she drove and admired her for her perseverance through it all, and allowed myself to just absorb the calm peacefulness of the current moment. Suddenly, the cruiser ahead of us came to a skidding stop on the gravel road. Grace loudly gasped as she slammed on her brakes, trying to avoid rear-ending Grant and Brandy. My heart raced as I grabbed the mic and began yelling into it, begging to know what was going on and why they had stopped so quickly. Did you see that? Brandy's voice responded over the radio. No, what was it, a creature, a trap, what? No, I think I saw a house behind the trees. Did you guys see a driveway or anything like that? I can't see shit. It's starting to get too dark, I replied. Oh, We'll back up, and you can use the spotlight on the cruiser. Ah, shit, good idea. I forgot that little bitch was even there. Back up. Grace put the SUV in reverse, and we saw the spotlight come to life and begin scanning the trees before Brandy also started backing up. As the light scanned the trees, I couldn't see anything, and apparently neither did Brandy, because she shut the spotlight off and continued forward. Another 50 yards ahead, and we came to a barely used dirt driveway of sorts that led back into the trees. A tsunami of disappointment crashed over me as we pulled up to the house. It was long abandoned and completely dilapidated. Part of the roof had rotted away and collapsed in. Well, fuck, I said under my breath as we looked at the pile of rotted boards before us. Hey, check over there to your right. The road continues, Grace said into the microphone after she took it from my hand. She was right. The road did continue back further into the woods. Without responding over the radio, the cruiser pulled off and continued down the dirt road between the trees. After about 10 minutes of driving and my brain screaming, I don't think we're supposed to be here, man, we came to a clearing with another house as the dirt road ended. I think this one'll do, Grant's voice came over the radio. The house was so much better than expected. It even looked recently built, which seemed nice at first, but since it was so far out of the way, it instantly made me curious if there had been anyone already living in there. Grant and I quickly began to search the area as soon as the vehicles fully stopped. Darkness had completely engulfed us all by the time that we had got out of the vehicles, which made effectively searching the house and area difficult. As we made our way in the front door, and what I could only assume was the kitchen, a little light shone from the wall. It displayed the time. Wait. No fucking way. This place has working power, I said in utter disbelief. Grant began to feel around the wall, and suddenly I heard a click as the bulbs flooded the room with light as the electricity began to flow through them. Almost immediately after the lights flickered on, I could hear the vehicles outside turn off. Grace and Brandy stayed in the car until Grant and I came back out to give them the signal. The coast was clear. We were well hidden away, the cabinets still had food, and amazingly well enough, all the power still worked. With all the stuff in the freezer that was still working, and all the cabinets, we ate like kings. That night, I felt the safest I had in over a month. Maybe it had something to do with how hidden away the house was, or maybe just how awesome the meal was, but either way, we all slept well that night. One bedroom had us in our typical security sleeping pile on the bed, and the room next to that had Grant and Brandy. As I laid down, I half expected to have trouble falling asleep with my head full of worry, but to my surprise, I fell into a deep, deep sleep. Almost immediately. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you thank you for watching today's video on YouTube or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. If you guys are interested, because we're moving into spring right now, that means that the allergy seasons are going to be hitting us. And I don't know if you guys can hear it very well, but it hits me pretty hard. To get yourself past a couple of those allergies, my wife sells tea. I don't know if that's connected, but hey, it's a segue, and my wife sells tea. Check out etsy.com/ivorymonocletea to be able to check out some of the tea that my wife makes. And you can even get a special sticker if you order the MrCreepyPasta tea and you ask for it. It's a sticker of me doing a dab. It's one of my Twitch emotes. And I want to give a big thank you, as always, to all of my Patreon subscribers on Patreon. You guys are the real MVPs. You are the ones that allow me to do stuff like getting specific stories just for the channel. If you guys want to see more of that, then I would really, really, really love if you guys could help support on patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta, like some of these wonderful guys, such as Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Stephanie Butler, Bobby Karman, Tristain Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, KhaosArts, Kryolinian, Milk and Miel, Silty K. Sterlerson, Zachary, Graffius, It's All About That Fucking Music, Goreng Trimegacy, Maria Walker, Tonya Oran, Pain Gravy, Crazy Kid, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Ika Limchok, Dirt Diver 030, Matt Bach, Dabbles Raz, Voice of Sand, Coffee Zombie, Matthew McNeese, Shelly J, Jeremy H, Raltazal, Ficomel, Nana, Nick Weaver, Melted Lake, Tolly Sue, Sky Mara Ravenswood, William King, Darth Milver, Michael Ortiz, Satanic Aries, Nessie, Barterhawk 764, Lambda M98, Harley, Billy Morrow, Sashi Suzaku, My Body Sounds Like Rice Krispies, Kaylee Ambrose, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Azarine Fox, Freddy Krueger, Nicholas Sicardi, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades' Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiri the Sloth, Tommy Green, Fester Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, Sanchez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Paulson, Trace Miles, and Corey Kenshin. You guys, as well as everybody if you look down in the description, and everybody that can even just give $1 to be able to help things out. I really appreciate it. If you guys would like to join this list of names that I horribly mispronounce, check out patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And honestly, even you guys who just listen, you watch, you comment, you like, you subscribe, thank you all. I really appreciate it. And sweet dreams.